Welcome back to Life After Trauma, a podcast for trauma survivors on a journey from survival mode to presence and self-reconnection. Before we begin, I want to let you know that I now offer one-on-one guided sessions for people who are navigating healing, self-reconnection, and life after survival mode. These sessions are not therapy, but they are a soft, trauma-informed space to reflect, feel supported, and begin coming back home to yourself. You can learn more at my website. I'll have the link in the show notes. Today, I'm joined by Laura Hoorweg, a spiritual counselor, intuitive coach, and psychic medium whose work blends grounded guidance with intuitive insight. Laura supports people through life transitions, grief, trauma, and moments of deep self-reconnection. In this conversation, we begin with intuition and self-trust, but the episode opens into something much deeper: trauma, grief, the body, and the freedom that becomes possible when we stop living inside the cage of what happened to us. By listening to this episode, you'll walk away with a deeper understanding of how trauma can affect your ability to trust yourself, how grief can become a healing process when we allow ourselves to move through it, and how to notice when you may be avoiding what needs to be felt. You'll also hear how to begin distinguishing between intuition that is asking you to expand and a fear-based trauma response that may be keeping you stuck. And we'll explore simple ways to reconnect with yourself and ways of helping emotion move through the body. My hope is that this episode gives you a new lens for understanding what you've carried, more compassion for the ways you may have protected yourself, and a reminder that life after trauma can be more than survival. It can be freedom, presence, and coming back into full color. As always, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and listen in the way that feels supportive for you. Let's go to the episode. Hi, Laura, and welcome to Life After Trauma. I'm really grateful to have you here.
Oh, thank you.
I'm really looking forward to today's conversation because building or rebuilding self-trust is something that has been on my mind and heart lately. I've noticed how easy it can be to slip into seeking external validation or following other people's opinions, even when we do have a strong sense of our own intuition. So I kind of want to start there with the part of self-trust that often gets missed. I don't think most people wake up one day and randomly decide to stop trusting themselves. Usually something teaches them that their inner knowing is wrong, inconvenient, unsafe, or too much. And often we don't feel the distance from ourselves growing until we're so disconnected that we start wondering, who am I again? From your perspective, what are some of the ways we become separated from our own intuition in the first place?
Well, interestingly enough, one of the main causes is trauma, actually, because trauma is actually a block to all forms of trust. Trusting yourself, trusting other people, trusting the world, trusting life. People always think of trauma as it has to be something really horrific. We're traumatized in so many ways. We are traumatized from the moment we are born into this world. I'm talking primarily about our Western society because of the way that our mothers are forced to go through the birth process and us, the ones being born. That is our first trauma. Okay.
Mhm.
And then every other trauma that we have throughout our life, and believe you me, there's lots of them along the way for almost everyone. It becomes what's called complex trauma, because every time you have a trauma that's lying on top of another trauma, on top of another trauma, on top of another trauma, it again keeps you from that trust. It keeps you from the trust in yourself, keeps you from the trust in others, and it keeps you in just generally trusting life and the world. So it's a very, very, it's almost become a systemic issue
Mhm.
for everyone, unfortunately.
From your answer, what I'm taking is that not only is it trauma that kind of separates us from
Yeah.
our intuition and disconnects us from ourselves, which can I've been there. I completely agree, but it can also be part of our environment and almost like the nature versus nurture, like the nature side of things has become so distorted from
Yes,
how it
that's a
was.
good word. I like that word, distorted. Yes. Distorted from the ways that it should be, the ways that empower us.
So when someone realizes that they've spent years overriding themselves, there can be a lot of grief there. Grief for the choices they made, the relationships they stayed in, the versions of themselves they silenced. How do you hold that grief without turning it into more shame?
Well, okay. The biggest thing that people don't realize when we talk about grief, people think grief is a thing that's never ending. Okay, that's the
Mhm,
first misconception. Grief is a process. You know, if you look at the work of Kubler-Ross, I think it was what, 5 or 6 or 7, I can't remember exactly, phases of grief. And that's meant to be a process. And that process is actually a healing process.
yeah,
And grief in of itself was meant to be a healing process, one of the healing processes. But we've turned it into another thing to be afraid of. Okay, because people are afraid of grief because they think grief is goes on infinitum, goes on
mhm,
forever. And grief is not meant to go on forever. And if we allow ourselves properly to feel our feelings and go through that process, it's actually extremely healing. It's
it
very,
could.
very healing.
Yeah.
And the grief process itself can help lead you to your intuition and to your connection with yourself. This is why so many people have absolutely profound insights and transitions through losing somebody very close to them, losing a loved one. Okay. They come out of that process, that grieving process, not only healed, but being carried to the next level of their development.
Mhm.
And if we look at it as a process and we look at it as something to not be pushed away, not to be afraid of, not to be avoided. Okay, this is the big thing. There's a huge avoidance around grief. Uh, if we look at it as something to be embraced and as a healing modality, instead of something to be avoided, it can be absolutely magical and transformational and can take you not only personally, but it can also help you to help others around you to have amazing transformations. Whether they're going through the grieving process with you or they're just people who are supporting you or surrounding you either they could be friends, they could be workmates, whatever. But I've seen that happen, that somebody who's actually going through the grieving process is a catalyst, there's a good word, is a catalyst for all the people around them, even the people that aren't involved in that grieving process.
So what would if somebody was going through grief, what what would it look like? What would kind of be some signs for them to notice if they were avoiding it? Because I feel like when we've gone through something that's so incredibly heavy, like the loss of someone we
Mhm.
love, I feel like it's really easy to almost get lost in that. And so are there any signs that somebody could be like, "Oh, this is actually me avoiding grieving the loss?"
The biggest one I see, and I sort of went through this myself, and so I can I can because about 11 years ago I lost my partner suddenly, so I know of what I speak. If you're like a few weeks or even a few months out, and you're like, I'm fine now.
Mm,
No. Now don't get me wrong, everybody goes through the grieving process in their own way in time. Okay. But it's not something, if you lose somebody very important to you and you're like 3 weeks out and you're going and the funeral's done, all that stuff's done, and you kind of go, okay, I'm done. I'm good now. I can guarantee you are not, and that
yeah.
you're pushing it away and you're in denial. And the problem is with that is the longer you're in denial and you're saying to yourself, you're okay. I'm done now. I'm done with that process. The longer that you sit in that, the more of an explosion, the more of a that will happen to you because you're stuffing everything down. Okay. And I can tell you right now, you can only stuff it down for so long. And that's the early heavy grieving. Okay. Which is what makes people most afraid and what they push away because it literally can feel like you're dying yourself. Okay.
Yes, it's really intense.
It can literally feel and sometimes we go into survival mode. That's why I say really in the I think the first let's go back to Kubler Ross. We'll have to check it out. But one of the first ones is denial. Okay. And we're in denial because we go, okay, I've lost this person. I've gotten through the whatever, whatever your particular traditions are. I've gone through the funeral or the celebration of life, whatever it is. And I'm good now. I'm still a little bit sad because I miss them, but I'm good.
Mhm,
No, because the one thing people don't understand about grief, and I'm going to tell you, it's not just about the grief of losing something. You can grieve almost anything. Okay.
yeah,
You can be grieving the loss of a job or a career that you were really attached to. You can be grieving the loss of a home. Like a lot of people who have sudden losses of home, whether it's through financial, whether it's through fire. Like, there's a lot of people who go through these wildfires, where whole towns are burned down and, most of the people lose their houses. That is extreme grief. Okay. Because
mhm,
people don't realize, they think it has to be a person, anything losing something dramatic, even I have seen, and this is partly due to our society now, but that's another story. I have seen people when they turn the big zero numbers, usually 40 or
yeah,
50
mhm,
is those two sort of quote unquote middle age milestones
yeah,
depending on the person. Okay.
mhm,
And what it is really is because all of a sudden they decide that they're old and what they're grieving is no, seriously, they're grieving their youth and they think that, oh my God, you know,
yeah,
and it tends to be not necessarily with everyone, but what I've noticed, what I've seen around me and through my clients, women tend to go through it early because there's this thing on women about women have to look eternally young, but oh, guys look really sexy with little gray in their hair. There's
right.
this incredible double standard. So I
Mhm,
see more women around the age of 40 going through this, and more men tends to be around 50. But
yeah,
I've also seen women go through it twice. Okay.
mhm.
They say it's sort of, it hits the first wave is like 40 and then they hit 50 and then it's like, oh my God. If
Like
they,
it just
let's put it this way. Yeah. If they didn't deal with it properly at 40, then it, again, remember we talked about this compounding thing
yeah,
that when they hit 50, it really knocks them to the ground because they hadn't dealt with it properly at 40. So now that
yeah,
they're 50, it's like, oh my God, like my life is over. Like I've
yeah,
literally had people say to me, and not just
mhm,
women, but men. And it's
mhm,
like, oh my God, my life is over. Really? But again, that is also a very Western thing, a very developed world thing because we have lost our in many many other cultures and societies, elders are highly respected and almost in a way worshipped
yeah,
and for their knowledge and for their expertise and everything. But in our culture, in our Western culture, we are so ridiculously biased to youth, this whole youth culture,
mhm,
that it's almost like getting old is a sin.
yeah,
you know and it's something to be avoided at all costs. See, there's that avoidance thing again.
mhm,
Okay. And
mhm.
avoidance is not being willing to accept. A lot of trauma is acceptance.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the resistance, right?
It's
Like
the resistance to that acceptance that causes
when
people a problem.
yeah, when we resist something, we prolong that suffering.
We not only prolong it, but in a lot of cases we create it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because it's just like, actually, we're in a perfect example of this. It's this whole getting older thing. It's
Hmm.
because it has no meaning, negative meaning to us at all, except the one that we create when we resist it. So if we're
Yeah.
not resisting it, there's no problem. I'll give you
Yes.
a personal example. I had a very, very challenging childhood and young adulthood. And I was shocked when I made it to 20. Then I
Mm.
was shocked when I made it to 30. And I was even more shocked when I made it to 40. And I realized when I made it to 40 that I was here because I didn't think I'd be on the planet. Okay.
Mm.
I went out to lunch with a bunch of gals that I worked with, and there was about a dozen of us, and we were all the same age
Okay.
or relatively the same age. So there was some women there that had just turned 40 in that last year, and there was a bunch of women who were turning 40. And we kind of went, I don't know how this happened, but we went around the table and everybody talked about being what it was like to be turning or have turned 40. And oh
Okay.
my God, I ended up being at near the end of the chain around the table. And every single one of the women before me had nothing good to say about turning 40. It was all bemoaning becoming old, and this was wrong, and that was wrong, and that was wrong. And I just looked at them all when it got to my turn. And I just said, oh my God, I'm not kidding you. I was ecstatic. I was happy about turning 40. I felt like I had reached this pinnacle. I had survived. I had created this life for myself. And I'm not kidding you. Every single one of those women at the table looked at me and they just looked at me like I had two heads and that I was absolutely crazy. Okay. And it just showed me how these constructs and these beliefs that these women had put in their mind was
Mhm.
causing them so much pain. Because when some of these women were talking, oh my God, they were almost in tears. They were
Mhm.
so demoralized and so upset about turning 40. And I'm looking at them, I go like, you're crazy, lady. Okay. I'm so glad to be here. I'm very happy. I think life's great. What's your problem?
Yeah.
You know?
I am very much feeling this because I turned 39 at the end of this year. So
Okay.
I'm not very far off, and
Yeah.
the fear has already creeped in a little bit,
But you know
about
what? That's not, I would suggest to you personally that you take a really hard look at that because honestly, it's not you. It's what you're allowing yourself to believe that others have told you. And it's not
yeah.
just others, it's our whole society. Okay.
That's what I was gonna say,
It's
yes.
our whole society. And this is what I'm talking about, this youth culture, and especially for women. As I said, there's still some of it that goes on men, but I would say about 80% of the pressure, this youth culture pressure, is on women, and maybe 30 or 40% on men
Yeah.
because, after all, they just look distinguished. They just get. I've actually heard women stand around saying things like, "Oh yeah, men just get sexier when they're older, but
Mhm.
women just look, you know." And I'm just
Yeah.
like, but
Mhm.
it's true, it's true. And, there's this thing about age is only a number, and it is,
Mm.
because it's really, and not only that, I can tell you because I'm quite a bit older than you, it's how you feel about it determines not only what you look like, and that's the least of it, but it's
Yeah.
really about how you feel about yourself inside. And
Yes.
that strongly affects how you show up in the world. Actually, to a great extent, how you physically look. Because I see people, I'm also a yoga instructor. So I'm
Mm.
very conscious of people's posture and the way they hold their bodies.
Mhm.
And you can tell just by looking at somebody if they think they're old or not.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, seriously. You can look at somebody and you can see their posture, the way they hold their body, the way they walk.
Mhm.
And I guarantee you, I've seen people and they look just because, and then you start talking to them and then you find out why they look like that and
Mm.
why their posture is like that, is that they just because of the way they feel and think about themselves, they are making themselves look 10 to 15 years easily older than they actually are. Okay. That also shows up in your face a lot
Yeah.
for people.
Yeah.
This is why when people smile,
Mhm.
all of a sudden they look so much younger
Mhm.
because people, I had a girlfriend once that called it resting bitch face.
Yes. Yes.
And there's so many people around that that's sort of their natural way that they
Mhm.
walk around and they show themselves in the world. And then if
Yeah.
something out of the blue happens and they actually smile, they look like a totally different person.
Yes.
But the thing is, if you walk
Yes.
around holding your face, it's like anything else. If you walk around holding your body stooped and rounded shoulder, this is things that make people look older. And
Mhm.
and people walk stiffly, not necessarily because they have I've racked up my body. Totally. I've been in 4 or 5 car accidents, at sports
Mhm.
injuries, climbing injuries, all kinds of things. But I
Mhm.
don't walk around like I'm a stiff board. But if you
Mhm.
watch people, see, now everybody's going to be watching the way people walk. If you look
Right.
at and you watch people walk, because normally that stiffness and stuff is a sign, and the stoopness and the rounded shoulders and the sort of the hunchback look,
Mhm.
that is all things that happen with advanced age. Okay, like I'm talking advanced age.
Yeah,
But a
like
lot of people, and you start
Mhm.
doing that when you're still young. I'm telling you, I've seen people in their 40s and as early as in their 40s,
Mhm.
definitely 50s and 60s, that walk around like that. And if you are constantly moving in that way, that is going to affect you permanently. Okay. It's the same
Mhm.
thing as your face. If you're walking around with that resting bitch face all the time, you are going to have lines. Your face is going to look that way, and it's
Mhm.
going to take on a very aged, premature aged face.
Right.
Okay. But if you're walking around and you're smiling all the time and you're energetic and you move well and stuff like that, you would be amazed what a difference it makes. Like,
Mhm.
I'm going to toot my own horn. Nobody believes how old I am. Okay?
Mhm.
Now I will admit up front that definitely quite a bit of that is due to genetics, but
Yeah.
it's also, I'm talking about my skin, but it's
Mhm.
also the way that I hold myself, my attitude, and the way that I show up. Okay. It's not just what I look like. Because I've
Yeah.
even had people who've never seen me in person
Mhm.
and I've talked on the phone with, and they going, "Oh, like you sound really young. Like how old are you?" And they're always shocked. Okay. So I'm
Mhm.
just giving you these as examples because this is all part of letting that trauma go. Okay.
Mhm.
This is another way to start realizing I never thought of this before in this particular way. I love my guides. Thank you. That's another way of knowing how sort of calibrating yourself and knowing how well you've done with healing yourself from trauma.
Mm.
Because all those things we just talked about, body position, facial expressions, all those things, that's another way to look at somebody and know that they've gone through some very significant trauma and that they
Mm.
haven't allowed themselves to heal. And
Right.
there's the line, allowed themselves to heal. Okay?
Mhm.
Cuz I don't care. I've been through some extreme trauma myself and I've seen others who have been through extreme trauma. And if you are open to letting that go and to but to see, in order to let it go, you got to feel those feelings. You can't push them away. You can't avoid them. That's when things get stuck. But if you are willing to go through the process of
Mhm.
healing those traumas, I don't care what trauma, how much trauma you've been through, you can
Mhm.
come out of the other side a healed, connected, trusting person.
Yeah. Yes, I
So,
agree. So my belief on, like, I don't like to use the word healing. Sorry, I don't mean to say I mean to say I don't like to say
oh
healing
no, I
trauma.
know, I know what you mean.
Like
And
yeah. So, but for me, it's like a lot of it is integration because like trauma can almost become like an identity and
yes,
separating that identity from like this is something that happened to me. This is not who I am. And then we can integrate that experience into ourselves, which is hard to do. It's not a simple thing, but it's
Well,
that integration that
you have to
um,
be careful with that one
mhm,
because I have a very, very strong belief that's been proven over and over again that we are what we experience.
mhm, okay.
Okay. It becomes a part of us. It helps define who we are.
Mhm,
And you can do that. You can let it define you in a positive way, or you can let it define you in a negative way. And I'm not saying we are our trauma, but our
mhm,
trauma helps us to evolve into who we are. Okay.
mhm,
Because I
exactly.
always say, if I hadn't gone through a lot of the things that I've gone through in my life, I would now what would be see, you have to have these things. I don't like good and bad because it's
No,
a very misnomer, but
it's too black and white.
that's the way most people see it. So, and
Mhm,
I'm talking when I say that I'm talking about both the good stuff and the
mhm,
stuff that most people would consider extremely negative, okay?
yeah.
But if I hadn't if I hadn't experienced any of those things, I would be a very different person in a lot of
Mhm,
ways. Okay.
yeah.
I
I
don't think
wouldn't
it
sure.
changes the inner spirit of who you are, but I
Mhm.
definitely think it informs who you become and who you evolve into.
Yes, I agree, and that's what I mean by the integration piece is, like,
Yeah,
that you're taking that and you're allowing that to become part of your journey and become
exactly.
part of where you're moving to in life, and I completely agree, like, I would not be here
Oh
hosting this
yeah.
podcast, having these conversations, doing the work that I do if I did not have the experiences I had, so
Yeah. And that's a good thing. I really want to emphasize to people because, it's something I even use in my work
Mm,
because it's one thing to have, and I'm not discounting it because book learning is also, and it can also be very important, but it's very different to be able to look somebody in the eye and say, I know exactly how you feel because I've been there. Okay.
yeah,
That's very different than learning something in a classroom or learning something from a book. Okay.
yeah,
That's why support groups are so incredibly helpful to people because you're
mm,
sitting in a room with a bunch of people that have been through either the same or similar experiences to you, and you know that they get you on a visceral level. Well,
yeah,
I'll give you another example. I had a client and I just love this in it because I thought this was happening, but it's good when you get reinforcement for yourself. Okay.
mm,
One of my female clients said to me one time, she says, Laura, I've gotten more out of an hour session with you than I got out of 3 hours, 3 years of traditional therapy. And I just went, wow, you know,
yeah,
so that's what I mean. Like, and I combine my personal life experiences with my
mhm,
gifts to
mhm,
synergize into a very, very different type of working with people. It's very
mhm.
different
Yeah,
than
that's
sitting in
amazing.
front of a therapist or even a traditional counselor or
Yeah,
coach.
yeah,
So it's very, very different. Comes from a
mm,
very different place and very different energy.
yeah,
I talk about
for
everything's being energy.
yes. I wanna shift gears here a little bit. So,
Sure, go
I
ahead.
think I think there's a very human pull to want someone else to tell us what to do, especially when we're exhausted, overwhelmed, or afraid of making the wrong choice. Why do you think external guidance can feel so comforting even when it slowly disconnects us from our own power?
It doesn't have to. That's where I was going, okay? And then this is something I get told by spirit all the time that they're not here to disempower us. They're
Mhm.
here to help us to trust and validate our own guidance. Okay. So they're not here to tell us what to do. In fact, my guides over and over again will say, we're not here to tell you what to do. Okay. They're here to give us, and spirits here in all its different forms, to give basically to lay out options and to help us to decide what may be the best path for us, not to
Mm.
tell us what to do or to tell us who to
Mhm.
be. In fact, I've never had an experience where spirit actually told somebody what to do, with
Mm.
one exception. The only time that that ever happens, and then so I take it really serious when this happens, is if somebody is in imminent danger. Okay. That's
Mm.
the only time that my guides and their guides have ever said, you've got to do this, or you've got to leave this person, or you definitely can't do this because you're
Mhm.
putting yourself at risk. And usually it's flat out physical harm that they're saving them from. The reason that people love to have other people tell them what to do, okay?
Mhm.
You know what the
Mhm.
reason is? Most people don't know what the real reason is. Because if somebody else tells you what to do, it eliminates you having to take responsibility, okay, for what you do and what happens as a consequence of what you do. This is the other reason why spirit will never tell you what to do, because they want us to experience the consequences, good, bad, or indifferent, okay, of our
Mhm.
own choices, because that's part of our growth.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, wanting somebody else to tell you what to do is simply a form of bypassing.
Yeah.
And I don't care what state you're in, like whether you're in a, a fairly good spot, or whether you're feeling incredibly overwhelmed and you don't know what to do.
Mhm.
And this is funny because when I went through my heavy, heavy grieving process, when my partner suddenly decided to leave this world, I went through really heavy stuff. And it was like, we're not going to tell you what to do. And also what was wonderful was they freed up. Sometimes you don't need to know what to do. Okay.
Mm.
Sometimes you can just do nothing for a while.
Mhm.
And this is
Yeah.
another thing that we're brainwashed. Like, we think that we always have to be doing something,
Mhm.
that we always have to make a decision. Sometimes it's just not the right time to make a decision. And I can
Mm.
tell you, when you're in a heavy grieving process, like especially in the beginning, that is probably the worst time to ever make any kind of important decision. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people. I would say, what should I tell them? Okay. That's a good number. I always check just to make sure. 6 months. You shouldn't even and some people longer. Like I said, everybody goes through different process, but kind of as a rule of thumb, after a serious loss and
Mhm.
being deep in the grieving process, you shouldn't even think about making any kind of major decision until at least 6 months out.
Mm.
And see, this is what absolutely makes me crazy, because you wouldn't believe the amount of people that get into another relationship within the year or less after they have gone through a major grieving process. And it's not necessarily just on a partner level. I'm
Mhm.
talking about other people too, because it's not just losing a partner and then jumping into another relationship. It could be something like losing a parent or losing a sibling, and
Mhm.
trying to make, and jumping into a personal relationship. Bad idea. Really, really bad idea. And what that usually does is put people in a position where they're going to experience, we talked about this already, compound trauma.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll deal with it, especially in the partner range.
Mm.
If you lose a part, there's a couple of exceptions, but they're very rare. We can talk about those if you want. But mostly, you shouldn't even be thinking about dating. Like, this is the other thing. I'm not even talking about getting into a relationship. You shouldn't even be thinking about dating until minimum a year, minimum.
Yeah.
And I always say, the longer that you were in that relationship, the longer that period should be. Like,
Mhm.
if you've lost somebody who you've been with for 20 or 30 years, like,
Mhm.
I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to be over that. You're not going to be ready to get into another relationship for several years. And
Yeah.
see, this absolutely puts people into fear. Like, 'cause
Mhm.
so many people, men and women, they can't imagine. They're so fearful of being on their own, especially if they've been in a long term relationship, because
Mhm.
really they've never been on their own, is what it comes down to. And that's part of the growth process,
Yeah.
because whenever you have a major grief, every single thing in your life that you've swept under the rug, that you've
Mhm.
pushed away, that you haven't, you've buried and you didn't want to look at, I can tell you right away that all those things are going to come up for review. And that's the other reason why you shouldn't be rushing into other big decisions or new relationships. Because not only do you have to go through the grief process of losing that loved one, but you also have to go through the process of dealing with all these issues that all of a sudden get dropped right in your plate. Okay. And a lot of them that you thought that you'd already dealt with.
Mhm. Mhm. I've been there. Yep. I'm
And
like, "Oh, is that?"
this doesn't only involve. I had another experience that really showed me something that I I got COVID, and I had complications from COVID, and I ended up having to have open heart surgery. And I
Mhm.
thought, I'm one of those people that recovers pretty quickly physically. And I
Mm.
thought I would, I'm all hunky dory, I'm ready to go after, it's been a year, year and a half, and I'm ready to go. And I should have known this, because if you
Mm.
know anything about open heart surgery, they literally saw you in half. Okay, they go right down through the heart chakra, not to mention your physical heart. They pull it out of your body to work on it, and then they stuff it back in. So this is a major energetic, physical, spiritual, like any way you want to look at it. It's a
Mhm.
huge trauma. And it takes way longer to recover from than you think. Like they'll tell you in the hospital, the physical, and this is only the physical part, and that's not even true, that it takes 6 to 12 months to recover from open heart surgery. Not even on the physical side is that true, let alone all the other levels of that it hurts you, okay? And again, the same thing happens. It brings up again all this stuff that you thought you dealt with or that you didn't even know was there. Okay, all these issues. And all of a sudden that comes up for visitation. It's like, oh, here you go, plop.
Like, "Thank you. Thank you for coming back up." So, for people who have lived in survival mode, intuition and fear can feel almost identical at first. A trauma response can feel urgent and certain, while intuition may be quieter and easier to dismiss. How can someone begin developing discernment between the voice of protection, the voice of fear, and the voice of deeper knowing?
Okay, your deeper knowing, your intuition, your guidance, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter what label you put on it. It will never be wrapped in fear, ever.
Mhm.
Okay? And this is the biggest way to discern between actual guidance and trauma reaction. Because trauma reaction is always wrapped in fear. Okay?
Yeah.
Always. I don't care what it is. It's always wrapped in some kind of fear, whether it's physical, emotional, uh, in some cases, even spiritual, energetic. It will always have that major fear element to it.
Mhm.
Okay. And your guidance will not. Okay. Your actual intuitive guidance will not. It will feel grounded. It will feel subtle. It will not have that. Now, now you could be a little bit anxious. Okay. Being a little bit anxious and being feeling a little bit of trepidation. That's just more or less because a lot of times your intuition asks you to step outside your comfort zone. Okay.
Mhm.
That's very different than feeling that clawing fear response that, you can feel it, you can taste it, you can feel it through your entire body.
Yeah.
That's a trauma response. Okay. And the other way a trauma affects us is you're going back and forth. I call it the ping pong effect, where you're going,
Mhm.
yes, this is the right thing to do. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. That there's nothing. That's one of the easiest ones to spot because
Yep.
that's trauma. Okay. Because what's happening is the part of your logical brain is going, "Oh, well, I should do this," and then your trauma's going, "No," and then your brain's going, "Yes," and then your trauma's going, "No." Okay, that is what I call the ping pong effect. But when you just slow down, okay, this is the other thing. If you're feeling really hyper and super charged and energized, that is also a sign that that's a trauma response, because that's your flight mechanism going off on steroids. Okay. That's
Mhm.
always a trauma response. But when you are connecting to your inner guidance, your inner wisdom, whatever you want to call it, there's just this feeling of peace. There's this
Mhm.
quiet feeling. And the way to really connect that is by becoming quiet. I don't care whether it's doing some meditation, doing some journaling really helps with people, for a lot of people, going out for a walk in nature, sitting on a rock,
Mhm.
watching a sunset. I don't care what it is, but anything that sort of takes you out of our pressure cooker world, get off your phone, okay,
Mhm.
and just chill, okay? Or sitting, a lot of people really respond to like sitting, listening to sort of meditative, calming music. Okay, that's
Yeah.
another way. Or doing a sound bath.
Mhm.
Or some people really respond, especially if they people hold trauma in different ways. Okay. There's a bunch of ways, and we all kind of do a lot the same, but you may be predominantly, you hold your trauma in your body. Other people maybe hold their trauma in their mind. Other
Mhm.
people, maybe they hold their trauma in their emotions. We all do all of them, but we do it to different degrees. Okay. So if you're somebody who holds a lot of trauma in their body, okay,
Mhm.
massage is another one, like massages or steam baths or whirlpools, or another really good way. If you are, and the way to know if you really hold trauma in your body is if you have a lot of aches and pains.
Mm, okay.
Okay. Or when you're upset, your body your muscles and everything feel really tight. Again, as a yogi, I can stand there and I can look at somebody and I can tell if they're one of these people that really holds their trauma in their body. Okay.
Mm.
Because a lot of negative emotions are held in our joints and in our muscles. This is why yoga, okay, or any kind of like Tai Chi, even some of the gentler other martial arts, even to some extent dancing, okay, different kinds of, what do they call it? Not exotic.
Like expressions?
Uh, Dancing. Yeah, and free form dancing. There's another word, and it's
Mm.
this is what happens in menopause. So you just have to you just have to go with it. Um, It's not exotic, it's something like that. God, I hate this. My thesaurus goes on vacation. It's not erotic, it's the other one. Well, we're just gonna leave it there. You get the point, okay? It's free form dancing, okay?
Mhm.
That is ecstatic. Yeah, I think it is ecstatic. It's ecstatic dance, okay, where there's music and you just move. You're just on the
Mhm.
floor, you're dancing by yourself, and you just
Mhm.
move your body to the music, okay? Any of
Mhm.
those things and all of those things can really help people, especially people, not just people who hold trauma in their bodies, but especially people who hold trauma in their body. Okay?
Okay.
And
I would
also, it helps us release those negative energies from our body.
Mhm. No, I have experienced that. I love yoga. I also love dancing, and it's for that reason, like, it helps me feel, like I'm actually releasing things, and yeah, it's
That's why
wonderful.
sound baths are so good too. You're not actually moving your body, but the vibrations of the music are actually going into your, like, this is why a lot of people don't realize. And they have such, like, I've seen people just absolutely, people who would never, like, were super, super uptight and never could release things. I've seen
Mhm.
people go to a sound bath and just like absolutely break down into a puddle. They just, they're weeping, and it's a fantastic release for them. and works. It's incredible because the actual or a gong bath, there's kind of
Mhm.
two forms of that, or some now they're kind of mixing them together, which is kind of cool. So that is another thing that can really help
Mm.
in
The
terms
other
of.
thing I wanted to go back to for a second there is you had mentioned the anxiety piece. And I wanted to add that how I've come to distinguish those is that if it's my intuition asking me to step out of my comfort zone, then there there is fear, but it's almost more of like I call it like a nervous excitement. Like
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, there's a difference about feeling nervously excited about something. It's like going on a first date with somebody you really like.
yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
There's a difference between that and going, oh my, I feel like I'm going to die. Or
Mhm.
literally. Cause, and it's not trauma fear too. It can often be what I call paralyzing. Like you simply, like you, no matter how hard, you just can't force yourself to walk out the door. Okay.
Yeah.
That, is just like, no, this is trauma.
Mhm.
The other we're talking about is that excitement, anxiety. You're still getting, you still have no problem. In fact, you're anxious to get out the door, yet you're still nervous about it. Okay.
Mhm.
It's kind of like the trauma energy freezes you,
Mhm.
and the positive energy, your own intuition, even though you might be a little scared, it actually energizes you. Okay.
Yeah.
So something that freezes you is trauma. Something that energizes you, even if you're a little afraid, you know
Yeah.
that it's something coming from the core of you as opposed to coming from your trauma.
Yes. I always think of when I first published, like, I published the first few episodes of the podcast ever, and it was terrifying, like, so scary. I sat there, like, probably my fingers shaking for,
Mhm.
like, a few minutes, hovering over the publish button, but also it was like, I can't not. Like, I have to do this. It was terrifying, but it was also so exciting. And the other thing is a word that I've been loving lately is expansion. Does it feel like it's expanding you?
Yes.
Or when you think about it, do you feel like you're shrinking and like contracting
Contracted.
inside? Yeah.
Well, that's the same thing as the push and the freeze. It's the
Mhm.
same thing, okay? Because freezing is like really is a contraction because you think about how you feel when you're frozen. It's just like, oh my God, I'm all tucked in. And that expansion of being excited and like, oh, I'm really scared, but this is really good. It's like being on a roller coaster. Like
Mhm.
you're scared shitless, but you're actually having a ball. Like you're like,
Mhm.
"Wah!" And I don't even like roller coasters.
No.
I've been too injured for roller coasters. There's a whole 'nother reason behind that.
Yeah.
Roller coasters can be very tough on your body, especially I've had every kind of whiplash, front whiplash, back whiplash, both sides. So for me, roller coasters are not good because it forces the G forces my body into positions that it shouldn't go.
Yeah. So, for the person listening who feels like they don't even know what their own voice sounds like anymore, what is the first small doorway back?
You know, I started to sound like a realtor. Meditation, meditation, and meditation. Okay.
Mhm.
And honestly, I don't, there's so many kinds of meditation out there that you can find something that works for you. What I find that works for most people who are either new to meditation or have difficulty meditating is guided meditation. Okay. I still do guided meditation. Now there's
Mhm.
also a bunch of different forms of guided meditation. Okay. There's mantra meditation. There's actually guided story meditation. There's a bunch of things. All I say is keep experimenting until you find something that works for you. And the biggest thing that stops people from meditating, number one, is, I can't sit cross legged on the floor. You don't have to. Okay. You can even lie down to meditate, which I do often because I've had so many injuries and stuff like that. But because of the yoga, I can actually sit on the floor. on a
Mhm.
cushion. That's probably number one. The other one, the universal healer is nature.
Mhm.
Okay. If you, and when I say nature, the more wilderness like it is, the better, because the vibration of that nature is a higher and higher frequency the more you get away from the developed world, because the less signals there are, the more the forest is natural and preserved in its normal thing, like its normal energy. Because what that does is it does a whole bunch of things. This is why the Japanese now have this term forest bathing.
Mm, mhm.
Okay. Because really, what walking in nature, walking in the forest is basically a walking meditation. And some
Mhm.
people who would never be able to sit down and meditate, I don't care if you drug them or whatever, they just couldn't do it, right? But they can go out in the forest and they can go for a walk, or they can stop and sit by a on a rock by a stream
Mhm.
or whatever. Okay, and it's real. I think those are the two most powerful ones that can really help you connect. The third, oh, okay, they want me to mention the third. Everything's always in threes. The third one, and this really appeals to some people. It's never been a big one of mine because I've never been a writer. I'm very verbal, so I'm not so much connected to writing. But the other one's journaling.
Mm, mhm.
This is super powerful for so many people. It can also help you identify your true voice. Okay. There's all kinds of journaling little techniques, even like writing with your opposite hand, which is really interesting, by the way. The things that you come out, because what your opposite hand, if you know, if you're right handed, you should be writing with your left hand, and you don't care about how messy it is. It's the messages that come out, because it also has a direct connection to your subconscious.
Mm,
So a lot of the thing, and most of our problems are centered in the subconscious. We're not even aware of them. So sometimes to get awareness of those things, the best thing that you can do is actually sit down and ask yourself questions, okay? And then write down your answers with your non-dominant hand, and you'll be amazed at some of the
mm.
things that come out.
What is it about writing with the non-dominant hand that
It's the neurology of it is it's connected to your subconscious. It gives you a window into your subconscious, because your dominant hand is the one that's connected to your logical brain,
Right.
and that's why it's your dominant hand, right? But if you're
Right.
using it, and it also can, I also feel, yeah, okay, I just got a confirmation. I knew there was another one. It also has a connection, more to your soul, or some people would like to call it to your inner child. Okay.
Mm,
I kind of use those interchangeably because I think it's the same energy. I think it's the same thing.
okay.
So it also, and this is really good for people who have had birth trauma. And some people find out that they had birth trauma that they didn't even know about. Because let's face it, a lot of us don't have all the details for one reason or another of what happened around our birth.
Mm,
And all of a sudden, a lot of people, when they're doing this non-dominant hand writing, they get into talking about. And so this is another idea that you can ask questions about: the circumstances of your birth and what happened when you were born, and or even pre-birth, it just said, even like when you're, because there's a lot of people around who were traumatized in utero, and people
yeah.
don't even know about this because they have absolutely no conscious memory of it at all. Because if
Mhm.
your mother went through trauma, or if she was really afraid of being pregnant, or if she didn't want to be pregnant, all these things, all those energies while you're in utero, that goes into the baby. This is why it's so important, not only what the mother eats and drinks while she's pregnant, it's the atmosphere around her, her emotional state, and what's going on in her vicinity. And that
Mhm.
also includes the father or the lack that of, or even the family, because there's a lot of women who were pregnant, and this doesn't matter if they had a partner or not a partner. Okay. There's a lot
Mhm.
of people, a lot of women who were shamed in one way or another when they were pregnant.
Mm.
Our families do incredibly lovely things to us or other people too, because
Mhm.
there can be very negative, negative messages that women get from other people when they are pregnant.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
people don't realize this, because
Yeah.
everybody's got an opinion and they're not always great opinions.
Yes, and people love to share those opinions,
Oh,
don't
they just love to share those opinions. The other,
Yeah.
I'm going to put this out there. Actually, you want me to put this out there for pregnant mothers, and I've never thought about this. I don't know why I didn't think about this. This is an energetic thing, and I know it drives some pregnant women crazy because they've told me. People seem to feel entitled to go up to a pregnant woman and touch her belly. Okay, this is so bad. Okay.
Mhm.
You shouldn't be letting anyone except someone that you really want to touch your belly. Because
Mhm.
when people, it's bad enough being if they're inside your aura. Okay. Remember, your aura goes out basically if you put your arms out to the ends of your
Mhm.
fingers in front of you, behind you, and beside you. So
Okay.
even if somebody's standing within that range, they're already inside your energy, which is affecting your baby. Okay. If they're
Mm.
actually laying hands on your stomach, not only are they putting energy into you, but they're directing energy into your baby. And again, this might be a good thing and it might be a bad thing. But if I was a mother and I was
Mhm.
pregnant, I would not let anybody except for a very few people do that. And it's
Mhm.
very easy. Women feel obliged to let people do this to them. And you know what? All you have to say, you don't have to be a bitch. All you have to say is go, no, sorry, I would rather that you not. And that's all you
Yeah.
have to say.
Like, "No,
But
thank you."
yeah, no thanks.
Yeah. So, finally, the question I ask all of our guests, what does life after trauma mean to you?
Freedom. Because trauma is a limiting factor and it colors everything. Okay? It
Yeah.
colors everything. Colors the way that you feel about yourself, about your world, about the people around you, about what's possible in the world. Okay? For you and possible in general.
Yeah.
So it's really a limiting, it's like a resistor, if you know how electronics work, okay? Trauma is like a resistor and it limits your energy. And
Mhm.
so once you are able to move through that trauma, because remember we talked about it's a process, okay?
Mhm.
Move through that trauma, all of a sudden that resistor is gone and you can fully express your energy the way you want. But as long as you allow trauma to keep you prisoner, you will be limited in how you can express your energy in all forms.
That's so interesting that you used that choice of words, Laura, because the way that I have always described my, like, when I moved, I think the first time that I really experienced like presence, like moving out of survival mode and feeling
Yes.
present in my life, it I describe that as feeling like survival mode felt like I was living in black and white, and
Yep.
sir and presence felt like my life
Color.
was like full color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful way of describing it. Because as long as you're living within trauma and you haven't released it, you are trapped.
Mhm.
That's why I say freedom, because you're
Yeah.
living trauma's a cage. Trauma's a
Mhm.
cage, and if you don't have to explode the cage, you have to open the door and walk out of it.
Yes, exactly. We don't need to do any demolition.
We don't need no, you don't people think you have to do all these wild things, but trauma is just accepting that it was a chapter of your life and you're no longer in that chapter anymore.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
problem is that people stay in that chapter. And some people stay in that chapter their entire life,
Yeah.
which is really not just unfortunate, it is I'm trying to look for the right word. It's a horrible thing to see
And
people who were traumatized, and most of the big traumas tend, and the ones that really tend to impact our life the most
yeah.
happen when we're younger, either as
Yeah.
a child, young adults. There are traumas that can happen throughout our life, But the ones that people really have the most difficulty, I would say, letting go of are the ones that happen as a child or as a young adult.
Yeah. That's that's why I do what I do because I didn't realize for the longest time I didn't realize that that life could look different.
Yes.
And so I like my mission has just been like get this message out there that life doesn't have to look like that black and white picture. You know,
Well, and
there's
the sooner you walk out of that trauma, the sooner you accept it and you walk through it, the better your life's going to be. Because like
yeah,
I said, I've met 70, 80-year-olds who are still living within that cage of the trauma that came from when they were children. So
yeah.
they literally have lived their entire life in that cage. So
Mhm.
this is why I really encourage young people to really start having a deeper look at themselves and do the work.
Mm.
Because who wants to live, 60, 70 years in that cage, in living in that black and white picture instead of living in technicolor,
Yeah.
it's very unfortunate. And I think there's there's so much we're starting to have a better understanding of mental health and mental illness. And I think that is really starting to get people to the place where they get help sooner as opposed to later,
Yeah.
and your generation and the generation that's coming after you. I think that is so important because there's so many people basically in the two generations above you that have lived literally in trauma for their entire life.
Yeah.
I always say trauma it's not, it's the same as grief. Actually, those two things that have a lot of synergy
Mm.
because both grief and trauma, they don't have to be a prison. They're supposed to be a temporary state. Okay. And that's the
Mm.
other thing. You'll see people, I've seen people who've gotten trapped in grief. They've gotten stuck and it's 10,
Oh,
20, sometimes 30 years since the event that caused them the grief and they're still grieving. And when I say grieving, I mean in the heavy throes of grief.
right.
Grief change, it never totally goes away, but it changes. I think that the thing when you're out of grief is when you can think or talk about a person or an event and you no longer feel the negativity of it. You see the beauty and like, for example, somebody that we love, instead of feeling the pain of their loss, we feel the joy of the time that we spent with them.
Yeah.
That's when
That,
you can tell that you've healed from grief, when it's no longer the pain of losing them is the dominant. It's the joy of how you lived with them. And I think that's the same with trauma. It's no longer that heaviness of having that trauma inflicted on you. It's the lightness of feeling that you've moved past that. And now
mm.
that you're living your life outside of that trauma.
Mm.
Very similar, those two things, very similar.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to put it. Laura, thank you so much for your time today. Where
Thank
can
you.
one find and connect with you?
Okay. Well, the best way is probably through my website, which is really simple. It's just www.spiritspeaks2, the number 2.me. The other simple way is simply you can email me to get information or set up a session. It's just Laura Hoorweg at gmail.com. And the lovely Jess is going to put, of course, all my contact information in the show
Of
notes.
course.
But I'd love to talk to you, and I have clients all over the world, and this is my passion and my purpose. So I just love working with people. I just say I help people make their lives work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Well, thank you again so much for being here and for sharing all of your wisdom.
Thank you. It's been fun.